What's up, folks? Welcome back. My name is Deja. I'm a traditional astrologer, and in this video, I'm going to be chatting all about the aspects. First, I'm going to chat through what the aspects are, and then I'm going to go through the energy of each one. But before I dive into all of that, there's a couple of things that I want to note. I'm only going to be focusing on the 5 Ptolemaic aspects, those being conjunction, sextile, trine, square, and opposition. There are more aspects, but I feel like these 5 are the ones that are a little bit easier to intuit and to remember. I feel like they kind of speak to the layering and the reinforcing that happens within astrology and understanding all the different components and the different pieces. And the second thing that I want to note is that to prep for this video, aside from like bringing all the things that I've learned about the aspects thus far, I purchased a workshop by Kelly Surtees all about the aspects, and it's really amazing. It's on her website. I'm gonna link it down below in the description. I learned so much. Like, Kelly is such a phenomenal teacher. 125% recommend checking her out. I'm not going to be able to go into as much detail as she did in her workshop, but I just wanted to give that heads up for those out there who want all of those D's and who want to dive deeper. Really check that workshop out. Okay, so let's figure this out. What are the aspects? Technically speaking, the aspects describe the geometrical relationship between the planets. In normal people words, the aspects describe the conversation that the planets are having with one another. They describe how the planets are talking with each other and how they're interacting with each other. They tell us how the planets are working together, whether they're doing so harmoniously or if there's a little bit of tension. The aspects can tell us what planets are being restricted or even supported. And then with that, we're able to understand what areas of our life are also being supported and restricted, because the planets have rulership over the different houses in our birth chart. So kind of honing in on that really will tell you how these aspects are manifesting in our personal lives. So you can have a Mars-Saturn square in your birth chart, but Saturn rules your second house of finances and Mars rules your, this is probably inaccurate, but Mars rules your 9th house of long distance travel. So that, simply put, would manifest as there being a frustration between your finances and long distance travels, or even having some frustrations between your income and your finances and your meaning of life and your life philosophy, things like that. The aspects don't just tell us like things about those 2 planets and like about our personality makeup within that aspect. They also, what I think is the most useful part of them is that they can tell us about the other areas of our life, and they color and describe and give you more nuance as to what the experiences within all of these different sectors of your life, what they actually look like. I think it's really important that we kind of frame the aspects as conversations and being representative of the type of conversation that's being had between 2 planets. Okay, first up, we have conjunctions. This is when 2 planets are coming together and blending their energies. They're seeing eye to eye and they're kind of merging forces. Depending on who has more strength, who has more dignity, according to the Essential Dignities rulership scheme, which is a whole other topic for a whole other video. That ends up telling us who has the most say in what that conversation is going to look like. And that's true for all the aspects. Whichever planet has the most dignity, whichever planet has the most power or more resources to their advantage, rather, that planet will end up having the most say in how that conversation goes between those 2 planets. Now, a conjunction occurs when 2 planets are in the same sign. This is called a sign-based conjunction or a sign-based aspect. And conjunctions intensify as the 2 planets get closer and closer and closer to each other by degree. And this is true for all the aspects. All the planets can make sign-based aspects to each other, and that's just for the sake of them seeing each other and suggesting that there is potential for a conversation / there is potential for an energy exchange. The closer they get to each other by degree point, the more intense and the more activity is likely to occur between that conversation between those two planets. So that's something to remember. And as I said, that's true for all of the aspects. The closer they are by degree, the stronger the aspect will be. Okay, next up we have sextiles. Now, sextiles occur when two planets are about 60 degrees apart, aka there's one sign in between each other. Well, there's one sign in between them. So, for example, Capricorn makes a sextile to Scorpio because Sagittarius is in between Cap and Scorpio. Sagittarius makes a sextile to Aquarius because Capricorn is in between Sagittarius and Aquarius, etc., etc. And if you think about it, all of the elements that can help each other out to a certain extent form sextiles to each other. So the air signs form sextiles to the fire signs, and the earth signs form sextiles to the water signs, and vice versa. And this kind of speaks to that intuiting that I mentioned at the beginning. If you just think about fire and the nature of fire literally in our world, it really likes having air and oxygen. It literally needs oxygen to like get bigger. So when planets are in air signs and planets are in fire signs, they're kind of working together. They're offering each other some support. And it's not a tremendous amount of support because they are fundamentally different. They don't share modality and they don't share an element. But their differences help them to work together, essentially. Help them to kind of like just, work a little more functionally. Sextile aspects and that conversation replicates the energy of Venus. It's nice, it's easygoing, it's friendly. The planets are having a really cool conversation with each other. It's like seeing your friend and being like, oh, let's have this short convo for a second. And you guys are both like, oh, this was great. I'll talk to you later and I'll see you next week. That sort of thing. It's fun, it's light, it's nice. Sextiles are helpful. And they're supportive. They're not as supportive as trines, and that's what we're going to get into next, but they're supportive nonetheless. The next harmonious aspect are trines. Trines are when planets are 120 degrees away from each other, aka they're in the same element. If you think about it, fire signs will trine each other, like Leo trines Sag, Sag trines Aries, Aries trines Leo, etc., etc. Cap trines Virgo, Virgo trines Taurus, Taurus trines Cap, etc., etc. It's once you nail down memorizing which signs fall in which elements, that'll help you to kind of piece all of this together in a more, intuitive way, as I mentioned. And if you just think about the elements, that within itself suggests that there is a similarity between the two planets. They're both in spaces where they really understand each other and they have resources where they're able to kind of contribute to the conversation in a very grandiose and large way. Trines are synonymous to the energy of Jupiter. It's more large scale and a little bit more uplifting. And there's like an outward manifestation of that supportive energy. It's not like sextiles. Sextiles are like, oh, cool, cute, nice, calm convo. Trines are like sharing an idea with a friend of yours and then that friend like telling the whole world about it and then that idea like making you millions of dollars. Like it's like that. It's less intimate and it's a lot more outwardly expressive. Sextiles, as I said, are more intimate, a little bit closer in relation. And if you just think about it, sextiles, the planets are closer, literally. And trines, they're 120 degrees apart. They're further apart. So it kind of suggests like it has larger implications. For example, the fire signs making a trine to each other are going to share inspiration and energy. The air signs are going to share ideas. The earth signs are going to share stability and resources. The water signs are going to share systems for sorting through your emotional processes and things of that nature. They understand each other. They're like, oh, I know you. I know you. Like, here, I have this. Take this. This is going to help you so much. And then the planet is like, oh my God, thank you. I needed that. So within your chart, trines can represent two areas of life that are supporting each other, that are helping each other, that are helping the advancement and enhancing the experience that you have in that area of your life. So again, if let's say that you have Saturn ruling your second house, Mars ruling your ninth house, and Mars and Saturn are making a trine to each other. Your resources are going to be supported by your meaning of life, or your long distance travels are going to be greatly supported by your resources. Yeah, but that, like, having Mars and Saturn within an aspect within each, like, together, having Mars and Saturn in convo with each other suggests that, like, there is going to be some separating and limiting and restricting. So really understanding and nailing down what that aspect truly looks like will also take you understanding the significations of the planets. And when you nail down, you don't necessarily have to nail it down, but when you're able to kind of think of keywords about the planets, then you can kind of plug those keywords into understanding what that aspect will mean. So for example, Saturn, restriction, trine, harmonious, with Mars, separation, or asserting boundaries, solving problems. So, and Saturn also represents like long-term things, a longevity and things of that nature. So Saturn making a trine to Mars could suggest that there is a harmonious conversation between long-term work and restriction and order, and separation, handling conflict, handling problems. So maybe that looks like making long-term commitments for the sake of handling problems or solving conflict. Something like that. Okay, the last two are the tense and frustrating ones, oppositions and squares. But first, let me start with the square. Squares are when two planets are 90 degrees apart. This is essentially when they're in the same modality. Now, this is actually something I should note. Squares and oppositions are based upon modality. So for example, Aries and Capricorn form a square to each other. They're both cardinal signs. Cancer and Aries form a square to each other. They're both cardinal signs. But Aries and Libra form an opposition to each other. They're both cardinal signs too. And Cancer and Capricorn form an opposition to each other. And guess what they are? Cardinal signs. And that's true for all the modalities. The mutable signs will either form an opposition or form a square to each other. Same thing with the fixed signs. The fixed signs are a little funky though. That introduces a whole other topic that I'm not going to get into this video, but still the same process. They either form an opposition or they form a square to each other. And in this context, squares and oppositions create a little bit of frustration. The conversation between those two planets is a little bit more tense and a little uncomfy, primarily because these two aspects are synonymous with the energy of Mars and Saturn. Squares create irritation or frustration because one planet has to stop and let the other one go. It's like a moment of making some adjustments to understanding where the other person is coming from. So imagine a conversation where you are chatting with someone who is kind of similar to you. They move like you, but how they move like you is different. And understanding how they move takes a second. And in order to understand that, you have to pause and you have to stop. The energy exchange between the two planets call us to make adjustments and to make changes. The planets are figuring out how to best work together. Whereas oppositions, they are literally opposite. They're literally standing to oppose each other. Okay. I'm at a different space. I mean, I'm in the same space, but I'm in a different part of my space and I'm in something totally different. That's because I did not like the way that I explained oppositions in my first video. So I grabbed this book, Aspects in Astrology by Sue Tompkins. I honestly don't really like sorry, Sue, but I don't really like recommending this book because it is a modern take on the aspects, and some of the delineations within this book are a little too psychologically based, and I just don't know how to verify that because I have no understanding of psychology by any means. So it's hard for me to actually like read through it and say, oh no, this is legitimate, this is valid, this is invalid. Like, some of it makes sense for me and it resonates with me, but I don't want to like think that just because it resonates with me, it resonates with anybody. But that's my whole little spiel about Aspects in Astrology. It's a good book nonetheless. So if you're a little bit like more discerned and you can kind of like peel through what is psychology and what is not, then it's not bad. Then I would recommend it. But aside from that, she talks about like all of the different aspects. And so I pulled out, because I just could not like get opposition down the way I wanted to. So I was like, okay, Deja, you have to get it right. And something that she noted, one, the planets are like in a standoff. Like they're at opposite ends of the spectrum, and they're very different, but they're also relatively similar. And something I didn't notice, fire signs are going to oppose air signs. Water signs are going to oppose earth signs, etc., etc. So it's not just modality. Elements definitely do have a play in this as well. They're in a standoff, but they're still similar. Like they can still help each other out in a way. Do you remember back when I was chatting about the sextiles and about how they're kind of helpful because it's air and fire working together. But the oppositions, they're tense because it offers the planet another perspective of itself in a way. Because the oppositions, the signs that are opposite of each other, what people normally know them as the sister signs, they're more similar than they are different. Like those axes are symmetrical. They complete each other. They complement each other in a way. But understanding the complement, understanding how they work together takes diligence and it takes time. Because if two things are on opposite ends of the spectrum, understanding how to work with both energies equally, understanding how to give each planet space to kind of be cool and to express themselves, it takes time in figuring out how to work with them together. And that's why it's tense. And that's also why oppositions are synonymous with the energy of Saturn, because Saturn is all about longevity and being diligent and kind of restricting things as well and pausing things by a lot. Not just Mars pauses things and separates things for a shorter period of time. And Saturn is like long-term separation, isolation, let's go, you got to be diligent. So working with oppositions in your chart generally can just translate to X planet, X energy is opposing X energy. And then also with that again, the house that those planets rule are opposing each other. They're standing to oppose each other. And you have to work through figuring out how to balance each of those areas of your life. Yes. Okay. Again. Something that I kept saying in this video is that the aspects are based on the elements and the modalities. They're not based on the elements and the modalities, not technically. That's why I preface at the beginning saying, technically speaking, the aspects represent the distance, the angular distance between the planets. And I don't think I said angular, but it is an angular distance between both planets relative to a 360-degree wheel, aka the Earth, like in a birth chart. If the birth chart, it represents the Earth and where all the planets are around it, the aspects will tell you the angular distance between them, not like the actual distance in the sky between them. No, it's just like the angular distance between them relative to the circle, relative to the 360-degree wheel. Another way to help you to understand like what is going on, how often you are thinking about those conversations / how potent those conversations are within your life and within your birth chart, is by figuring out which aspects are applying and which ones are separating. So if you remind yourself that the planets are always in motion and they're always moving, that also then can let you know that the planets they're like moving, they're witnessing each other, and then they're falling out of that sight. When planets are applying, one planet is like gaining on another. And when they're separating, one planet is literally separating from the other. And separating aspects are ones that were more so prevalent when you were younger. Pre-Saturn return is what Kelly said. So I feel like it kind of all depends on like your own personal experience and really kind of honing in on that aspect and asking yourself, okay, is this a theme that is still coming up in my life, or is this one that has already kind of like subdued and passed away? And that's possible. And the other ones, applying aspects, are ones that you may find yourself always revisiting. You may find yourself that problem, that harmonious, like that support or that frustration, it's one that's always coming up and one that you're always revisiting in a way. So figuring out which aspects are applying and which ones are separating can let you know which aspects are the ones that you really should be focusing on. Other aspects that are important to focus on are the ones that involve the ruler of your ascendant. Now, let's say that you have a Gemini rising. Mercury is the ruler of your ascendant. Now, you go find Mercury in your chart and you look at all the aspects that Mercury is experiencing. You look at all the conversation that Mercury is involved in. This will tell you about you. It'll tell you about what your experience with self-development, what that looks like, because Mercury rules your first house of self and character. Now, this adds nuance, adds some extra insight on the aspects, and it can get a little complicated, but if you just kind of like just start with the ruler of your ascendant and go through and use the traditional rulers. Don't use Uranus ruling Aquarius. Don't use Neptune ruling Pisces and Pluto ruling Scorpio. Really stick to the traditional rulers for this sake and for the ruler of your ascendant. Yes. But start with the ruler of your ascendant, figure all that out, figure out what your personal experiences are, check in to see which aspects are applying, which ones are separating, and hone in and really say to yourself, is this something that I experienced earlier in life, or is this something that I keep revisiting and I find myself searching for answers for this sort of aspect? Is this something that keeps coming up? Ask yourself those things. And then you can do this for all the different houses. You can look at your second house and see what planet rules your second house. Then go find that planet in your birth chart and but look at the aspects and see what aspects that planet is experiencing. And it can tell you about the nature of the house that is ruled by that planet. There's a lot of layering. There's a lot of additional stuff that gets piled onto it. It never just ends at that one thing. You can always utilize, especially in traditional astrology, you can always utilize the info about one component for the sake of understanding something else. Always. There is a symmetry, there is balance, and there is beautiful nuances within astrology. So I'm really just encouraging you all to never let your curiosity die. Like, if something doesn't make sense to you within your birth chart, if an aspect doesn't make sense, one, you should totally reach out to me. You can DM me at Queen Jupiter Astrology on Instagram or Twitter, Queen Jupiter with 3 E's, or you can email me, whichever works. But never give up on your curiosity and never just take things with a grain of salt. Always question, always question the meaning and the symbolism of certain things within your birth chart. There is so many nuggets of gold that are lying and embedded within your chart. And it's going to take some time for you to understand them all. And you probably won't understand them all. No one ever really does because there's so much. But please know, if you ever reach a point where you're like, I've known everything that I need to know about this one thing, or you just feel like it's not enough, keep looking. Don't stop searching. Like, the information is out there. If you need to buy a book, buy a book. If you're really curious about it and you want to get a reading, book a reading with me. But yeah, no, seriously, I hope that this video has encouraged you all to kind of dive into your charts to understand them more. That's what I'm here for. I'm essentially here to just help people level up their understanding of their birth chart, because you can do it by yourself. You don't need me. I mean, you do. But like, getting down the basics, you don't need me. You can do this. I promise you. It may seem hard. It may seem tough. It may seem like there's a lot of stuff going on, but just always go back to the basics and remind yourself of the simple principles. Remind yourself of the keywords, of the houses, of the planets. Remind yourself of the modalities and the elements, and you'll be good to go. I promise. It gets easier as time goes on. I promise. But yes, I hope everyone has a fabulous day. And I think the next info video that I'm going to be doing is on the houses. I'm not sure. I don't know if people are going to want me to kind of explain a little bit more about the aspects, but I think the houses are going to be my next thing. And I'm really excited, because I love the houses. But okay. Bye, everyone. Oh, as I said, follow me on Insta. Don't forget to like this video and to subscribe. But yes, peace.